in Vietnam. When the states withdrew, the brothers followed their clients and set up exports to the United States. It was said their main partner was Tampa Mafia boss Santo Traficante Jr., but this is mostly speculation. Delivery of goods to the States involved Filipino smugglers who took them to Caribbean countries and from there transported them to the United States. The brothers also cooperated with some lodges of the Wo Triad, which controlled port and coastal areas. They helped get goods from ships to land without problems. Lodges from Triad 14K bought heroin number 3 in bulk and were also involved in processing it into number 4 before retailing and wholesaling it. The brothers' scheme ran like clockwork until the late 1970s. An increased drug problem forced Hong Kong authorities to take a closer look. In different ways, both brothers managed to avoid jail time and escaped Taiwan. It's believed that after establishing contacts with Li Wenhon, they not only got a supplier, but were recruited by the Kuomintang, who they actually worked for all this time. So they were not sent back to Hong Kong. The brothers quietly lived out their lives, spending the huge sums accumulated. They did not close their network either. It functioned until their deaths in the 1990s. The Ma brothers' main competitor was Ong Sik Ho. Born in mainland China, he was a member of a youth gang affiliated with the Wo Shing Wo Triad. At 21, he fled to Hong Kong when communists took over. There, he had already joined Wo Shing Wo, and a year later became a Red Staff. Soon, the bosses realized he worked better with his brains than hands and transferred him to Pak Chi Sin position. In case you've forgotten, this position imposed duties similar to accountant or economic advisor. Drugs came into Limpy Ho's life only in 1958. Before that, he engaged successfully in gambling and ran brothels. That year, he opened a small street outlet under cover of a produce stall from where he sold smoking heroin. His nickname came from drugs. His competitors beat him pretty badly, giving him a lifelong limp on one leg. But that didn't stop him. He soon added a tea shop and cantina to his stall, becoming other outlets for the powder. For about 10 years, Ing Sik Ho expanded his retail network until he met Ma Sik Yu, a lodge member of the Tai Huen Chai Triad Society. He had access to manufacturers in the Golden Triangle. They began bringing in morphine base, processing it into number 3 heroin to meet local demand needed by Ho's retail chain, then into number 4 heroin to ship overseas to wealthier consumers. By the early 70s, Ong Sik Ho was as big a dealer as his competitors, the Ma brothers. He too partnered with 14K and Wo in Hong Kong and tried getting into the US market. He lost out in the latter to the Ma brothers and turned attention to Europe, bringing heroin there via the Netherlands. By 1973, Ing Sik Ho had become the largest exporter of heroin to Europe. He did not rest on this status for long. The Ma brothers leaked intel about him to authorities through their paid police officers. In 1975, Ing Sik Ho was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He was released in 1990 for health reasons and in 1991 died of cancer. These examples will be enough to demonstrate the pattern of the Triad's heroin trade. As you can see, the two largest networks in the 1970s were built identically, buying raw materials in the Golden Triangle, processing them in Hong Kong, and selling both locally and abroad. This operation lasted until the 1990s. After that, heroin began to lose its lead position among drugs sold by triads. Synthetic, ecstasy-like substances took its place. Earnings from drug trafficking are probably the most lucrative source of income for triads. This is typical of the situation in the 90s, when Hong Kong authorities could not seize funds from a drug lord only because the entire bank where these funds were held would collapse, affecting other depositors. But drugs are not the end. The triads have so many earnings, you don't have enough fingers to list them. We'll discuss the 20th century because the triads' crimes characteristic of the 21st century are still too little studied. What they've been doing since the second half of the 20th century hasn't changed, so their approach can be translated to the present day. Let's start with racketeering and extortion, probably the most common types of earnings and those that best demonstrate widespread interference in public life. Someone decides to open a restaurant in Hong Kong. As soon as the Triad Lodge controlling the area sees this, they send their man. He comes and politely hints that the owner needs protection. If they refuse, they are gradually put under pressure. Guys from youth gangs come and fight with customers. Products are delayed or sometimes stop coming altogether if the society controls supply. Several times a month, they cause havoc on the premises. Not so bad that the owner goes bankrupt, but causing minor damage, hitting their wallet. Most of the time, there are only two outcomes. Either the owner starts to pay or goes bankrupt and closes business. Sometimes the owner has to pay two syndicates at once. Let's say they have agreed to pay one triad, but the establishment is on disputed territory and another triad also requests tribute. They have two choices: wait for the feud to be resolved, which could affect their business, or pay one triad for defense and pay the other about half that amount to simply drop the dispute, what's known as a dry wage. Street vendors are similarly affected. They're given specific places where they can trade, but you can only get that place by agreeing to pay the triad controlling it. These guys get dividends. If you've been selling meat under community protection for a long time, they won't allow another meat stand to open next to you, so you get steady income. Likewise, if you don't have a permit to sell, the triads will help you avoid inspections. Most often, they simply warn you when inspecting officials are on the way. There have been cases where inspectors were roughed up to keep the neighborhood of illegal vendors safe under triad control. Another profession the triads have taken over: cab drivers. Cab rides in Hong Kong don't go for cheap, and competition for the most profitable routes is always fierce. The triads quickly realized this and seized the best routes, allowing only drivers who pay to work there. For a route takeover to be successful, the community needs to get the majority of drivers to join their association. When the required number of drivers from the route are organized into a cartel, they're given special identification codes. All those who do not have codes are removed from the route by threats and intimidation. Here, the triads make money through entry fees for association membership and from monthly payments for the ability to keep operating. The only plus for drivers is that societies strictly control the number of employees on each route and do not allow price dumping, so drivers recoup their payments by way of higher fares. It's the passengers who pay for the entire ordeal. The fishing industry, well developed in coastal Hong Kong, has not been safe from triads either. All involved are obliged to sell their products at one of the fish markets controlled by authorities and pay 6% commission on proceeds. Otherwise, it's considered smuggling. About 20,000 fishermen on 5,000 vessels go to sea every day and return with their catch to fish markets. There, they unload the fish. It's weighed, sorted, and sent for sale, all carried out in auction format among pre-registered businesses. That's where the triads come in. The society controlling the market sends its guys to select the best lots of fish each day before auction. They put special tags on them, letting it be known to all other bidders they can no longer bid on those lots. In this way, they buy the best products at the lowest price, then sell them to restaurants and fish retailers at an inflated price. Many business people are happy to pay this price as it gives them an almost 100% guarantee of getting the best products in town. They are also involved in smuggling, buying products from fishermen who bypass markets, receiving payments from transportation companies that deliver fish from markets to buyers, and have income from fictitiously employed people as loaders who get paid but never show up. Next on the list, movies. The first thing triads make money from is filming in the open. It's not enough for filmmakers to get permission from authorities to shoot in certain locations. More often than not, they'll also have to pay for permission from the local syndicate. Otherwise, they'll get their shooting disrupted time and again. The second part is direct infiltration of the industry. This was especially evident from the mid-1980s to mid-1990s, when Hong Kong cinema was booming and was the third biggest film industry in the world after Hollywood and Bollywood. Successful Hong Kong films could make up to a 1,500% profit margin, including overseas distribution. Not surprising, the triads wanted in on the action too. The way societies capitalize can be roughly divided into several parts. First is work for hire, where a triad is called in to solve a problem. This can be an actor not getting paid or a movie company wanting to get a certain actor. From this comes the second part, where triads recruit a certain actor or actress by intimidating them or making them indebted, then either selling that person's rights to studios or forcing them to star in a movie of their own. The most famous case was harassment of Jackie Chan, who refused to star in movies offered by the triads. Eventually, the gangsters gave up and demanded $4 million for what they called loss of face. Whether Jackie ever paid is unknown. The third part is the movie's production. Triads make a movie, let it go into distribution, and wait for it to pay off. If suddenly no one goes to the film and theaters decide to remove it from distribution, they are clearly explained that the movie will stand in the box office exactly as long as it takes to make a profit. The fourth and last of the key parts is extorting money from studios. Triads can interfere with filming, kidnap actors, steal footage, threaten producers, and more with one simple goal: either to get a certain payout or ultimately form a partnership with a movie company. From movies, we move on to an equally large-scale industry: construction. Methods of extortion vary. Triad members can go to a construction site and threaten the contractor demanding money. They may start stealing construction materials, then demand to hire them as security guards. They can influence the quality of materials and the regularity of their deliveries in various ways, or organize the contractor's workers into a union and go on strike. There's also an option to simply squeeze the contractor and impose on the construction firm responsible for the project to join their own contracting companies. Although there are many options, the result is always the same. If the construction firm cannot get rid of the pressure caused by the triads, which happens very rarely, it puts its payment to the crooks into the cost of production, and it's eventually paid by the buyers of the completed construction. Incidentally, Hong Kong's modern international airport was also built with triad interference, with lodges from the 14K and Wo Shing Wo societies involved. Even when a building is constructed, this does not end the option for triads to benefit. As soon as a housing project is ready for delivery, a date is announced when people can reserve a place in line to buy. To do this, a person goes to the construction firm's office, stands in line, and gets a reservation. Then, in the order of the reservation queue, people can buy out the apartment they like. The triads send their fighters to such queues who forcefully get to the top of the list and get the first spots in the reservation. The apartments are then bought out and sold at an inflated price. But the triads aren't off the radar yet. More than a few apartments and new buildings are sold needing rough repairs. To finish them, a person can only use companies associated with the triads. All other contractors are simply not allowed. On average, repair in one apartment costs 150,000 Hong Kong dollars. One building on average houses 400 apartments. That is, from one building you can get 60 million Hong Kong dollars. Let's say even 40 of it goes to building materials. There's still 20 left over, which we multiply by 5 to 10 houses in the housing complex and get from 100 to 200 million dollars just from finishings. Combined with the earning options I listed before, profits for the triads in the construction industry were clearly more than this. Much of underground gambling from the lottery to casinos is also connected to the triads in one way or another, either through direct ownership or protection of independent operators. Prostitution is also on the earnings list for these societies, as well as filming and distribution of pornography. Yes, the triads are present almost everywhere there is money to be made. Smuggling, manufacturing and selling counterfeit goods, smuggling illegal migrants into the US and Europe, kidnapping, theft, and robbery, and of course, fraud. Nowadays, crimes related to the World Wide Web can be added to this. I wouldn't be surprised if soon the triads had their own groups of combat hackers under leadership of the coolest of them all, the Red Staff. But we won't dwell on these ways of making money since it's a smaller part of their profits. For now, the biggest, which we've already covered, are carrying out drug deals and extortion in every place imaginable. As you can see, the triads in Hong Kong may well be called a state within a state. But it's not only there that their influence has been seen. Now, let's leave the Hong Kong triads and go beyond the borders of both the former colony and China to find out where triad societies still function. As said before, China hasn't been a place where people lived a peaceful and happy life for a very long time, causing many thousands to move away. Likewise, they were followed by the triads. Let's begin our story about the overseas expansion of the Chinese Mafia with Southeast Asia. The Chinese came here en masse in the early 19th century. By the beginning of the 20th century, they were already a significant ethnic part of the territory. For example, by 1900, there were 60,000 Chinese in Rangoon, 120,000 in Saigon, and 200,000 in Bangkok. In Singapore, they were the racial majority. These people wanting to find a better life were just changing their surroundings for the same hard, poor existence. The triads did not care much about them, but only made money by selling them opium, using the women as prostitutes, and collecting tributes from those able to open a business. Gradually, the Chinese managed to settle down. The most skillful found a way to get rich, and the triads in turn got more money from extortion. For example, by the 1870s, there were Chinese tin mine owners in Malaysia under constant attack from the community and also a constant source of strife among the triads. In addition to conflicts between themselves, the triads also clashed with local Malay secret organizations, the most famous of which were the Red Flag Society and White Flag Society. They were similar to the triads in structure, but differed in that they had Islam at their core. The loss of original initiation rituals and hierarchy in Southeast Asian triads occurred even earlier than in Hong Kong. Already by the end of the 1920s, they began to lose their ideology and mixed with Malay secret societies, after which the religious component actually ceased to exist. The association remained only as a secret brotherhood. Its main goal since then has been profit, mostly concentrated in the illegal sector. After World War II, the main source of income for local societies was the opium trade and its derivatives. In this, they had an undoubted advantage: their close proximity to the Golden Triangle. The triads from Southeast Asia are considered the most peaceful, if I may say so, and have delved more into the sphere of fraud. This is due to the fact that since the 1960s, they've been subjected to harsh policies in a number of regional countries. In order to persist, the societies had to temper their appetites and stand out less. Those who did not want to adjust were ousted, and one of the points of their relocation was Europe, namely the Netherlands. Chinese enclaves have been present there since the days of the Dutch East India Company, when Chinese who worked on its ships decided not to return to their homeland and stay in Holland. In a familiar scenario, local triads began to form there. Then there were two more significant waves of immigrants. The first was after World War II, when the Dutch hired lots of Chinese to quickly rebuild the labor force on their ships. The second wave was in 1960, when mostly members of the triads were arriving. These two waves brought in societies from China and Southeast Asia that absorbed the locals and then created a major hub for smuggling heroin into Europe. The Netherlands was the perfect place for this, not just geographically. The Dutch were very soft on drugs, and police had very little experience fighting organized crime, even less against clandestine societies. Police were forbidden to catch drug dealers posing as buyers. Wiretapping was allowed, but could not be used as evidence. Drug transportation was illegal, but the power of police to stop and search was greatly restricted. Unless they found someone with a syringe inserted in their vein or a case full of dope, prosecution was virtually impossible. Light drugs were basically ignored, and cafes were licensed to sell them. The maximum penalty for possessing or dealing heroin before 1977 was 4 years imprisonment. In 77, this was increased to 12 years. But even sentenced to a full term could be released after serving 8. Prison was no deterrent to dealing. Dutch prisons were renowned for their comfort, and most dealers could continue business from their cell through visitors and unrestricted use of telephones. To top it off, the Dutch police had no Chinese officers and had no concept of triad societies. Opportunities to smuggle heroin were numerous. Customs officials in other European countries referred to the Netherlands as the strainer. Airport screening procedures were lax. Rotterdam was so large that customs control of ships was very difficult. The coastline was easy to land on, and the border with Belgium was open. Heroin shipped through Rotterdam could be on its way to Germany, France, or the United Kingdom within hours of arrival. The first major seizures didn't start until the 1970s, and yet the smuggling network had already been established in the 60s. I said earlier that the main importer was Ng Sik Ho. After Limpy went to prison, his spot was taken by the Ma brothers. But Ng Sik Ho and the Ma's were simply the ones who brought drugs to the Netherlands. They were prevented from entering the local market by a 14K lodge under leadership of Chung Mon, which itself was engaged in further distribution, buying heroin from those who brought it from the Golden Triangle and distributing it through Western Europe. 14K was one of the first non-local societies to open a representative office there after World War II. By the 1970s, Chung Mon's lodge had become so successful it was considered the most profitable 14K lodge outside of Hong Kong. Naturally, other societies could not help but find out more and began opening branches in the Netherlands, which led to bloody warfare. Even our old Ng Sik Ho, looking at all this, tried to establish himself there but was not able to due to his arrest. Chung Mon was killed in the fighting. It was believed that Limpy Ho took him out, but this could not stop the smuggling. Yes, there was some redistribution of influence and 14K was no longer the dominant force, but fundamentally it didn't change the big picture. After the Triads found a loophole in the Netherlands, they flooded through the hole to the rest of Europe, not just with heroin, but also with their affiliates. Where there are strong crime organizations, like in Italy, the Triads are not very active and cooperate with local syndicates. Where there are none, like in Germany, they're not shy about launching crime enterprises. They have the least influence in Europe in the Scandinavian countries, Portugal, Greece, and throughout Eastern Europe. The only country in which the Triads' presence is commensurate with the Netherlands is the United Kingdom. The Chinese presence in this country also started with sailors who worked on ships, this time with the British East India Company. Until 1949, their presence was limited to about 4,000 people for the whole of England. The Triads were already there, but with such a small community, they could not expand their enterprises very much. After the communists came to power, more than a small part of those who fled to Hong Kong, at the time a British colony, decided to use their newly acquired Commonwealth passports to move to England. This influx of compatriots increased the influence of local triads and also brought with it branches of the Hong Kong Wo societies. For 10 to 15 years, the authorities in England saw no problem with Chinese immigrants who were hardworking and isolated in their ethnic neighborhoods. They brought money to the economy but did not take space away from the natives. Also, the Chinese neighborhoods brought almost no problems with the law because crime did not go beyond their borders and authorities were satisfied with that. They had heard about the Triads as tales from Hong Kong and the decades-long fight against them had reached England, but they did not see any danger from this activity. That all changed when in the second half of the 1960s, a flood of heroin washed over the island. It's believed that the first to set up a large-scale smuggling network were Ng Sik Ho and the British 14K Lodge, which at the time was the dominant force with bases in London, Liverpool, Bristol, Manchester, and Southampton. Limpy Ho sent in the goods, and the 14K handled distribution. Gradually, as occurred in the Netherlands, other societies started to be drawn to the business, leading to regular outbreaks of violence related to the reordering of heroin smuggling power blocks. This continued through much of the 1970s and 80s. After that, the authorities had already taken notice, but it was too late. The chance to crush them in their infancy was long gone. In the context of Europe's triads, I mentioned only their main source of income in the drug trade, but that doesn't mean they were only involved in that. Everything I said about their earnings in Hong Kong can also be translated to the triads in Europe. The heroin trade was something I talked about separately because it was what really took them to the next level. If we want to say who dominates the societies in Europe, it would be the same three triad lodges that are key in Hong Kong: 14K, Wo Shing Wo, and Yi Hing. Triads from Southeast Asia have at times broken up their dominance. For example, the Singaporean syndicate Kong displaced them for a while from their leading role in the Netherlands, but eventually everything returned to normal. What conclusion can we draw from all of this? For one, the Triads at this time are not a huge monolithic syndicate with tens of thousands of members. Despite their fragmentation into autonomous cells, they remain one of the world's major crime syndicates. They may not have a unified leadership, but they have what in China is called guanxi. In simple terms, it's an entrenched practice of mutual aid among the Chinese that is created based on personal or work relationships, kinship ties, a common place of birth, and of course, belonging to the same secret society. Guanxi helps them spread their influence wherever there are Chinese communities, as well as maintain links between lodges. So even though they're fragmented, the triad lodges are always connected. They're like particles in an atom, different entities but still attracted to each other. With all their input and much less attention received in the Mafia or Latin American drug cartels, in time the triads may well grow to become the first truly global crime organizations.